Thursday morning with Sloan here, 700 WLW. So Google, which is taking over the universe, may soon partner with Nissan, Renault, Mitsubishi to develop under their Waymo brand. And Waymo is the Google-affiliated developer that is the leader in self-driving technology, that Google and Waymo are going to partner with Nissan, Renault, Mitsubishi. And they're going to develop autonomous cars, taxis, vehicles, trucks, and services for not just the U.S., but the global market. The thing, too, is that quietly Waymo, and again, is the intermediary between Google Maps and actual real-world driving. They've logged 10 million miles on public roads in the United States with very few problems. There's been a couple issues. Remember the ones in Arizona and the like. But if you're driving 10 million miles and you're, just as a person, at some point you're probably going to have an accident, a fender bender, something along those lines in some 10 million miles, which is way more than we'll drive in a lifetime. And so far, so good. However, this does not mean there aren't problems here. And the biggest concern, of course, is how do you litigate accidents involving self-driving vehicles? We're heading into this, it's a real world. It's happening as we speak. It's going to happen soon in our lifetime, where we'll be surrounded by autonomous cars. And some people say there's no way, it's a technology, but from some of the inside stuff, not inside, but some of the stuff I've seen from Waymo and Google, it's incredible just how well this stuff is working and how seamlessly, allegedly, it's going to integrate until, of course, there's an accident. Joining me on 700 WLW is Quentin Brogdon. He's with a law firm out of Dallas-Fort Worth, Crain, Brogdon, and has actually, this is kind of getting to be his area of expertise. He's done a number of conferences with attorneys about potential civil litigation involving autonomous cars. Quentin, good morning. How are you?
Good morning, Scott. Thanks for having me on.
Sure, no problem. This is certainly, I bet when you started your legal career some years ago, you never foresaw this being a specialty item, but I guess that's the genius of technology, right? It creates market opportunities for all sorts of unforeseen career fields and paths, right?
That's right. And most people don't realize how long the automation of our vehicles has been going on. It's been going on longer than most of us think. I mean, beginning in 1958, you had cruise control. They called it autopilot on the Chrysler Imperial. And then you've had a steady march towards more and more automation. And then in the last 5 to 7 years, you're getting these fully autonomous vehicles tested on the roads. And you're right. A number of them have crashed. We've seen some high-profile crashes. So there's the theory of how they work and how they will work. But, anything made by man and woman is going to have problems, and these are in a testing phase, and we're going through a transition right now, and there have been crashes.
Yeah, and there have. We'll get to that in a second. But, on your point, I would contend that we actually have a lot of self-driving cars on the road now. If you think about it, if you have a luxury car, we have cars now that will control the car and keep it in the lane. It'll brake and space yourself out from the car in front of you. If a pedestrian is near you, it'll react. If you're about to get rear-ended, it'll bolster the seat belts and put the seats in a stiffer position to protect you from a rear-end collision. And that's all just with sensors. That's not you. So you literally... if you have one of these cars, which now I should say of luxury, it's trickling down to the to the upper and the middle models too, where the car is driving itself almost. You're in there, you're technically driving it, but you take your hands off the wheel. You can do a lot of things, and the car is going to keep you safe.
That's right. I mean, right now we're in the phase where some at least refer to it as a partially autonomous vehicle phase, and arguably, although there are safety aspects to that save lives, certainly, drivers can be, in some circumstances, some of the crashes have happened because the backup drivers or even the attendants, in the front seat are kind of lulled into some would say, false sense of complacency because they still have responsibilities to take over the wheel at various times, even when cars are, allegedly driving themselves.
Quentin, we've seen it all. I'm sure you've seen it in Dallas. We see it here in Cincinnati all the time. And people who aren't driving nearly as close to autonomous cars, we're talking about doing things behind the wheel that you would only do if the car were driving itself. So we act like the cars now are self-driving, and I can imagine what's going to happen when they are. Let's get into this aspect of, okay, well, great. Technology's here. It's going to change our landscape, how people are employed, how goods move and the like with self-driving vehicles and self-driving trucks. Part of the problem is, though, okay, let's talk about from a liability issue here. My autonomous car is driving, and I don't know, it rear-ends someone. Am I on the hook for that? Is the driver the car, or is the manufacturer? Is it a manufacturing defect, or is it on the fault of the person who is in control but not in control of the car? It's an interesting legal argument, isn't it?
It is. It's going to be a case-specific analysis. If you are in a vehicle that truly, and we're not there yet, these vehicles are being tested, but that truly is autonomous, then if it rear-ends somebody and you have not been prompted in any way to take the controls, then arguably it's going to be the fault of the manufacturer or maybe the developer of the software or both. Right now, we're in the phase, as I said, where these Teslas, for instance, have been touted as self-driving, but when they're in a crash, Tesla will say oftentimes, well, the driver should have retaken control.
Right.
So there are fights about what degree is it the driver, what degree is it the Tesla. That's what we're going through now.
Well, you lawyers like to put stuff called fine print in there, right? And I'm sure that in these cars of the future, what will happen is like, hey, listen, it's not really self-driving. There'll be an asterisk and say, well, these are in closed course conditions and blah, 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 blah. Your results may vary. But somewhere buried in the fine print is something from the manufacturer, Quentin, that's going to say something along the lines like, well, it's self-driving, but you should always be alert and have your hands on the wheel and foot near the brakes just in case it's not, which defeats the whole purpose of it.
That's exactly what some say Tesla has done. Tesla has videos and other things showing people going down the road in a Tesla with no hands on the wheel. But you're right, buried in the fine print. And also, it beeps at you to warn you, put your hands back on the steering wheel. But anybody who sat in a hospital with a loved one and seen the alarms beeping and the nurses and doctors walking right by them knows that, you get in a phase where beep, 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 people start ignoring it.
Yeah, we hear that all the time, right? I pointed this out before. Car alarms. It used to be car alarms were kind of the new thing. People, there's a car alarm. Now, we all have, and I've never had course or known anyone to ever use one, but I'm sure on your key fob, Quentin, there's a panic button, whatever the hell that means, and you hit the panic button and the horn goes off. But the only times I hear it is mine accidentally hit the button and you're fumbling to try and turn the thing off. And it happens so much, people just ignore it.
That's a great example. That I think that hits the nail on the head.
You can use that in court. Next time you went in and try, you just put that in your notes. You can use that, no charge.
Thanks, Scott. I will.
It's true, though, as we're so inundated with noise all the time. What is another warning bell, buzzer, or alarm? It doesn't mean anything to us anymore. It's because it's so ubiquitous. No,
it doesn't, and that's one of the reasons the crashes have happened. Is they're still perfecting the interaction between the machine and the humans. Humans, some would say, can in certain situations get lulled into thinking, well, I don't really need to be that vigilant. I can check my emails. That's happened in some of the Tesla crashes. And these machines, they use, people think they can use a GPS to maneuver completely, but a GPS is only accurate to within a few feet. So they have all these other sensors, radar sensors, LiDAR using light, radar using radio waves, and those have to all interact together, and then the software has been programmed to make certain assumptions about what the other drivers are going to do.
Sure.
Some crashes happen because the software early on assumed all the other drivers would yield and follow the traffic regulations. Well, of course, that's not what happens on the roadway.
We're talking to Quentin Brogdon. He's an attorney and is really in a new and emerging field here as he's specializing in, having given conferences to other lawyers about potential civil litigation involving self-driving vehicles, autonomous cars, which were on the cusp of the autonomous car revolution. The question is, okay, we got these things. What happens when there's an accident? Who's responsible? Is it on my insurance? Is it on the manufacturer? I think that's another interesting thing here, because now, generally, if there's an accident, it's caused by my inattention, right, Quentin? I'm texting and driving. I'm looking at the hot girl on the right, and I rear end somebody in front of me. I'm driving on a day like today, speeds that are not safe for the conditions present. I'm at fault there. With an autonomous car, that is all an inanimate object. That's on a computer. That's on the LiDAR, the radar, all of these sensors as well. If my insurance company looks at that, and because obviously they're looking to mitigate their loss too, how would insurance work under this model? Who's responsible?
Well, insurance companies are having what literally could be described as panicked meetings trying to sort out those very issues. Just how many fewer crashes will occur, how much will those crashes cost, how quickly will AVs, autonomous vehicles, be adopted. Are they going? Of course, they're looking really at their bottom line. What do we have to charge for the insurance? Will we be paying out less often on it? Therefore, will we have to drop our rates? Traditionally, I think you alluded to this. If you and I are in a wreck, you sue me today, and my auto insurance pays for a lawyer and then pays you damages if you win at the courthouse. In the future, it could be you having to sue my autonomous vehicle manufacturer or software developer, and probably ending up, for reasons we don't have to get into, in federal court, which is more time-consuming and slow, rather than state court, where most car wrecks are today.
That's interesting, too. It's going to change that whole dynamic, and you think about how big the automobile is in what you do, litigation, right, and the court system and the like. Certainly we have high crimes, and we think it's all over. It's maybe about less than 1%. We talk about violent crimes and the like. Most of this stuff is driving related when you look at the court docket.
That's right. Car wrecks are a big, big chunk of the civil side, the monetary cases that are about damages. Car wrecks are a big chunk of that today. And there's a big debate. Can our system adapt? Do we have to move to no-fault insurance, where the only issue is how much you're paid, not who's at fault?
Right.
That was tried in the 70s in a number of states, but it didn't work out so well and had a lot of problems. It's okay in theory, but you're giving up a lot of rights when you move to a no-fault regime.
Well, closest one to us would be Michigan, because they were notorious not too long ago where people would deliberately get into accidents so they could bilk someone else's insurance company. And they said, okay, we're going to go no fault, which has stopped that, but it's opened up a whole host of other problems, isn't it?
That's right. You're right to a trial by jury. I don't want an insurance company or a group of bureaucrats deciding what my damages are. I would like the opportunity, and most people would, to stand before a jury and let a jury of your peers decide. And the problem is no fault tries to eliminate the jurors from the equation, the theory of that's one thing, but how it works out, it's not so good.
One other element here, too, Quentin, I think this is fascinating, because we're all like, oh, man, self-driving cars are going to be great. It's awesome. It is. It's going to put some people out of work. It's going to create work for other people, and, fields and specialties yet unknown, kind of like yours, and what you're talking about, being a lawyer involved in litigating civil cases involving self-driving cars. It's a whole brave new world out there. But, what are the other elements, too? And it's kind of coming now with things like Uber and Lyft, where if I'm at the bars and I'm drinking, having a good time, I gamble before I drive, and I may get popped. I got an OVI. I need an attorney. My life is in shambles now. I'm paying tons of money. I may have to go to jail. I may lose my job. It's not worth drinking and driving. All of a sudden, these these ride-sharing services come along, and hey, guess what? I can Uber to the next bar, and then just when I'm done, Uber home, get my car tomorrow. Just Uber to the bar and then Uber home, and I don't have to wait for a taxi, because that was always a pain, and they're unreliable, and it took hours to get one. And now, within 2 or 3 minutes, I can have a ride out front for the cost probably of less than a drink in some cases, which has been an awesome thing. So now autonomous cars come along, and now instead of the Uber and Lyft model, my car can take me, kind of like, I guess, if you're drunk back in the days of the Wild Wild West, Quentin, I would just get in my horse and buggy all hammered, pass out, and the horse would know its way home. I wouldn't have to do anything, right? And now the car's going to do that. Okay, let's say that there's an issue where I'm inebriated, and I have to take control of the car, and something happens, or I get in an accident as well. How is this going to change OVI and DUI law?
Well, that's a great point, because you're going to have an option with an automated vehicle that you wouldn't otherwise have. And let's just say, not just DWI and being intoxicated, but people who are blind right now, you could actually travel in your own car. If you were blind, if we moved, and we'll get there one day, we're debating how quickly, to a fully autonomous vehicle on the roadway. There are lots of, more than 90% of crashes are caused by human error, and a lot of those crashes involve intoxicated people, big chunk of them. So you're right. It's going to change. It remains to be seen, but it's definitely going to change that area of the law as well. As
well as, at the onset of medical and legalized marijuana for recreational use, we live in a drug culture, we always have. It's changed and evolved, but again, people go, oh, I don't have to worry about it. Here in Cincinnati, we had a big issue. I'm sure you've seen it too, where you are, of people who are dying for the next fit of heroin or opioids, and they take an opiate and they pass out behind the wheel of their car and just wreak havoc on people. With a self-driving car, you largely eliminate that, but there's still got to be some. Doesn't there still have to be, from a legal perspective, some liability on the point of the driver?
Well, it depends, how our law is going to evolve. If it's a fully autonomous vehicle where literally you can be sleeping in it, will the laws allow you to be intoxicated in it? Perhaps. And that will have to be spelled out very specifically in the penal codes of each of the states. Right now, each state has the option to define what is intoxicated, what you can do while you're intoxicated. So that's going to have to be fleshed out. And if it's fully autonomous and you could be sleeping in it, then perhaps it's no different than being in your home and being intoxicated, which is not a crime in most states right now. I mean, if I'm not in the public area, but if I have a duty to be monitoring my steering wheel and perhaps to take over in an emergency, maybe I should not be intoxicated in that vehicle.
It's certainly going to be a really interesting legal arguments coming out of this thing, too, as well. And it's making me think an autonomous car that's fully autonomous, and I don't have to take control of it. And I could actually, I may take a future car, I may take my glove box out, put a wet bar in. What about that?
Yeah, that may be a possibility going forward. I mean, like driving around in a limo. There are limos now that serve alcohol. You're riding in the back. You're not the driver, and that in most states that's perfectly okay.
Yeah, it is really fascinating, this area, and it's the things you just don't ponder when you talk about autonomous vehicles or anything for that matter. You go, wow, this is really cool, and you focus on how new and unique and how game-changing it is. But then you start to think about, things like the legal consequences of it, too. Then it's going to be an interesting fight, and probably we'll see a number all the way up to the high court, and we may even see you repping a case or two at a high level. Quentin Brogdon, thanks again for the time. Hope to have you back soon. Appreciate it.
Thanks, Scott. I enjoyed the conversation. We'll all be watching how this moves forward.
Yeah, it certainly is interesting times in which we live, said everyone at some time ever in world history. It's always been, I say, when we were developing the first automobile, I'm like, wow, these are interesting times we live in. No, same thing here. It's just I hope I'm alive to be able to see some of these innovations. But that's going to wind up causing a whole host of other problems too, right? It's like, hey, we solved the problem of drinking and drug driving and driver inattention, texting and driving. Great. We have autonomous cars. And there's going to be some unforeseen problem that we don't even realize that it's going to cause as a result of these things. And that's just the way it is. We always wind up innovating and adapting. It is the endless cycle. It was here before we came into this world. It'll be here long after.